Hello. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. So, I am live, and I'm hoping that some people come soon. And because I am reading the first chapter of Miss Story Dragon and Joy, the author of Singularity, and it's a really good book. She recently finished it, and I intend to share the first chapter with all of y'all. I've got at least one person watching. That's awesome. Hello there. I'm not going to start reading immediately. I'm gonna hope to get a few other people coming here first. But hi, it's been a long road for her. I think it was like a year and a half ago that she started uh, that she started writing this. Maybe 2 years. I'm not sure, but it has been quite a while. So yeah, promised her long ago that I was going to help her promote it. And what ways I was intending to help her promote it would be to read the first chapter or live on stream. And I hope that that makes people more interested in it. It definitely should because as it's a really good book. So yeah, this it is somewhat inspired by Mass Effect, but it is not Mass Effect. It's her own unique universe. So I mean, I guess I'm going to start reading it. So let us change screen over to here. And here we go. Chapter 1. One thing leads to another. Genesis, we have to take this job. I know, Turok. Then why are you hesitating to push that button? He asked. Because I wish we didn't have to. Remember what I remember what you told me when we first met? Sometimes we can't do what we want to do. Sometimes we do what we have to do. Yes, and right now I don't want to remember words. Just think of the credits, Jen. I know. Think of what we can do with them. I am Turok. Do you need me to accept it for you? She sighed. No. With one tap of her finger, the holographic yes in front of her turned green with confirmation, and then disappeared. The apparatus on her wrist chimed, which gave her a once over. Got the location details. Looks like we're going to the Canis Beta cluster. Hopefully it's a nice planet. Hamathur, Paris City. I've never been there. You? No. But I hear it's pretty upscale. Large sweeping mansions nestled in the rocky cliffs, cascading waterfalls, dense green forests, and it rains 6 months out of the year. But that is Paris Heights. Paris City is the metropolis closest to it. I'd rather not jade your opinion on it. Oh God. Somehow that doesn't sound all that great to me. But it can't be worse than Eternium. Apparently you haven't been to Midnight Crest yet. If you ever end up there, it better be a quick stop. Considering you're the source of this information, I don't think it's as bad as you say it is. Suit yourself, he replied, shrugging his shoulders. You live and learn. Welcome into the Talsar handoff point. Please confirm your end destination. the robotic voice hummed. Canis Beta Cluster Hamathar, Genesis replied. Destination confirmed. Your warp drive into this stream will be ready for use very shortly. Please stand by. They sat in deafening silence momentarily. Want to be nice when we won't have to use a public warp drive? We could just jump from system to system without waiting for our turn, Turek said. Yes, and that's if we can ever afford a ship with a warp drive. He sighed. A little bit of optimism could go a long way, Jen. She said nothing in response as her attention turned towards the unending dark expanse outside of their window. So many stars and so little time to discover them all. Interesting moment to get stoic, Stone. It comes and goes, she jested. The warp core launch initiation sequence will begin shortly. Please do not attempt to commandeer the ship or relay any messages over the holonet while inside the stream. Any interference may result in galactic displacement. Oof. Serious injury or severe damage to your vehicle, and even death. Thank you for choosing the Talisar Public Warp Core. The subtle white glow of the console dimmed momentarily as their ship was pulled into alignment with large cylinder-shaped poles that curved wickedly through the blue-black expanse. Several hundred other space shuttles of varying sizes hovered all around them. The core of the warp relay on their ship roared to life, and the sheer force caused the floor to rumble and the loose fixtures to rattle. Every time we go through one of these things, I wonder if we'll come out the other side in one piece or several, Turek grumbled. Have some optimism, Turek. An intense blue light shot forth from the warp core, and the ship was pulled closer and closer. The sound was so sharp and piercing it was barely audible. You got me. Genesis closed her eyes just as they were pulled through. As many times as they had done this, she couldn't get used to all the different sensations that came to life in her body. The urge to empty her stomach of its contents was unavoidable. The rough skin of Tarek's palm enveloped her hand, and her shoulders relaxed. Feels like it takes forever, doesn't it? After inhaling and exhaling deeply, her eyes opened. The stream was made entirely of brilliant, intense color and ethereal light, a complete contrast to the endless dark void of space. Iridescent strings of cloud-like formations surrounded their ship, seemingly close enough to touch and yet appeared to be far away. She continued to gaze out the window, trying to take in as much of the phenomena as possible. As quickly as they entered, they exited, and all of the light that engulfed their vehicle dissipated. The warm light faded almost immediately and was replaced with the cold glare of the dashboard lighting. We made it. He replaced his hand on the second helm, and she turned off the autopilot feature. She nodded in silent agreement. Should be the easiest credits we'll earn this month. Well, now that is not a good thing to say. Ever. Sorry. The navigation system automatically steered their ship to the second largest landmass on the Rubicon planet. As they neared its surface, the hull of the ship creaked as it pushed through the atmosphere. Soon she could see the bare landscape dotted with a cluster of tall buildings and an abundance of red sand. Dusty planet, she remarked. A municipal landing zone was situated to the left, and she went forward, allowing the craft to descend gently as the flight control droid guided her. That's a part of his charm, Genesis. The planet has been turned into a giant red desert for centuries. Bad for agriculture, but great for sand surfers and the Arperius. Finally, the plane was on solid ground, and she could turn off the engines. Arperius? Sand serpents. Nasty things. Best if we didn't wander off into the dunes without a sand drifter. Noted. Stay out of the sand, but we'll need goggles with the way the wind is blowing this dust around. She dipped her hand in the compartment between the two of them and grabbed two pairs. handing one and putting on the other. When the rear hatch opened, a gust of hot wind whipped across her face, and the sun bore down heavily on her head and shoulders as they made their way to the depot. A large metal gate, it, it that extended indefinitely into the desert, and a small security hut separated the landing zone from the rest of the city. Their surroundings were definitely silent. Seems pretty tame to me, Turok. Just you wait, my dear, he says. A security guard approached them, his yellow-green eyes looking them up and down. His easily stood he easily stood several inches taller than her alien companion, bearing an assault rifle in his hands. State your name and purpose. Genesis Stone, and this is Turek Erdest. We were assigned by the Galactic Investigative Bureau to case number 3370544. Yavik Tim, species, Ernot, tried and convicted for identity fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. He has been assigned into the re-education hub Maelstrom and is in need of transport. Okay. Give me a moment to confirm. Examined the holopod and pad in his hand briefly and extended it to her. Place your right thumb here. She did as instructed, and he gestured for them to follow him into the small hut he came from. You got here sooner than we anticipated. He'll be ready shortly. The guard led them down a brief, dimly lit hallway to a set of double doors, which slid open and revealed the city she had seen on their descent. The tallest buildings were a few dozen stories, and apparently would have been taller. Or, the tops of their structures were jagged, as if they had been forcibly torn down. Panes of glass were missing or broken on just about every floor, and a few armed men stood in the openings. Her eyes trailed further down the streets, which were littered with abandoned hover cars. Few storefronts were still open, and there were armed guards at each entrance. Children were playing with a ball in the middle of the street as their laughs echoed in the air. A few dozen people traversed the streets, their faces hidden from the sun and sand. They eyed the trio suspiciously, but quickly assessed that they were from off-world and turned their eyes elsewhere. Genesis continued to examine her surroundings, her hand at her hip. Her eyes darted left and right, examining as many faces as possible. She attempted to steady her breathing as her hand moved away from her sidearm. What happened to this place? She asked quietly. Time, Turok replied. It doesn't look as bad from above. Once desert storms became a common thing, most of the people went underground or left the planet. Interesting. And what you told me about Paris Heights must be a lie then. Not at all. You'd be very surprised what credits can buy on a forgotten planet. Look at the horizon and towards the east. As instructed, she did so, and her jaw slackened. Wow! Floating high above them and many miles away in plain view was the Paris Heights. How did I miss that on the way here? Simple. They have cloaking technology that reflects the surface of the planet from above. Those flight control bots that guided the Tempest to the landing zone, they're programmed to destroy anything that gets too close to Paris Heights without prior authorization. Any and all entry is bottlenecked by several heavily guarded checkpoints on the ground. It's invite only, of course. I understand why you told me that I wouldn't like it, Turok. See? I know you better than you think. Genesis said nothing in reply as they approached the Paris City security building. It was mostly intact and well maintained on the outside, save for some jagged shrubs that were growing through the cracks and a few etches of graffiti on the side of the structure. Once they stepped through the sliding doors, they were met with they were met with a refreshing blast of cold air from the conditioning units. The inside walls were powder blue with cobalt furnishing, with the exception of the large front desk, which was made of a dark gray metal. Two guards were posted on either side of the door on the far right of the main hall. and two on the floor above them, standing at the balcony. Desks lined the main floor all the way to the rear entrance, and there were several officers sitting at their desks, preoccupied with one thing or another. The guard lifted the communicator on his wrist to his mouth and asked, "What's the status on the Ernak? We're about to cross the plains." "We're bringing him up now, Neris. The elevators are busy. By the time you arrive, we should be at the processing checkpoint." A female voice on the other end replied. "Of course," he sighed. He turned his sights back to them. "Follow me." "First time on Hamathar?" They were headed towards the double doors. "I came here quite often and a few decades ago for some recon missions, but this is her first time," Tarek replied. The doors opened and they were in another corridor with a door at the end of the hall. "I haven't seen many humans out here," their escort said. The door slid open and they were in a small, dimly lit hangar with vehicles that could traverse the sand. They floated in a neat of a dozen and secured to their individual stations. Each one had 6 seats, 2 rows of 3 each. He walked over to the first one and got into the driver's seat. Genesis sat in the front passenger seat furthest away, and Tyrek climbed in behind them. The small craft hummed to life with the touch of a button on the console, and with a half turn of the wheel, he steered them towards the hangar door and out onto the sand. Their surroundings became a soft blur as the vehicle moved at a smooth, steady pace. The wind that blew around them was cool, and Genesis rested her back fully on the cushion, removing her goggles. Despite the sad state of Paris City, Hamathar was beautiful in its own way. The aqua blue sky and the crimson red sand danced in a sharp yet welcoming contradiction, and without a cloud in sight, the three milky white moons that orbited the planet were in clear view. "Those three moons inhabited?" she asked. "Yes. Why? You humans have your eye on them?" "I wouldn't know. I'm not scouting for real estate." "Good. They've been off limits for centuries, even to the Ilkana. We tried to colonize the high plains, but the native species are too hostile. So we abandoned any and all habitation endeavors." "Seems like the logical thing to do," Turek chimed in. So the Ilkana created Paris Heights?" Genesis asked. "No. Paris Heights predates is when we arrived here. No one knows who inhabited it first, only that it's been under the control of the powerful families for generations." The conversation ended, and they drove in silence until they reached the gate. Genesis looked around, realizing it was part of the large square perimeter. Each wall was several stories high, with guard towers in each corner. "Here we are," Nerys announced, pulling into a stall and shutting off the engine. They all climbed out and headed into the small building with writing on it in a dialect that consisted of dots and jagged lines fixed together to form symbols. "What's this place called?" Genesis asked. One guard was stationed at the front desk, and several were standing around quietly talking amongst themselves. "The Pit," he replied. "All the criminals are kept in cell blocks underground. Easier to spot them trying to escape." Their conversation was cut short by the doors sitting to their right on the other side of the room sliding open. Two guards of different species emerged with a small, beady-eyed individual with pointy ears, almost too big for his round head. I love the mental image. He had cuffs secured to his tiny wrists and a collar around his neck. Genesis looked to Turek for an explanation, and he chuckled at her confusion on her face, shrugging his shoulders. "Right on time," he said. "You're going with them, little guy," the female guard teased. She pushed him forward with the butt of her rifle, and he stumbled. His beady, dark eyes shifted left and right quickly, studying Genesis and Tarek. "Human, Ibarian. Not uncommon to see these two species together. starting to see more humans in the galaxy, away from Earth. Not sure it's a good thing. His speech pattern was quick and deliberate. I don't know if I can trust him with my safety. You don't have a choice, Tim. This isn't a luxury cruise through the desert to your private ship. You're a criminal. Now get moving. The same female guard replied. Her voice was increasingly harsh in tone with each word. Genesis eyed her carefully, and they locked eyes. Her ruby red irises were eerily still and dull like those of a reptile. Genesis started to speak up, yet changed her mind as their escort grabbed at Erdak by the crook of his arm and led him back to the hangar. They piled into the vehicle again, but this time Genesis sat next to Tarek in the back. Very shortly, they were back out on the arid desert plains. The sky had already turned a different shade of blue in the short time they were inside, and the stars had begun to dot the white expanse. Sweat began to gather and whisk away on her forehead as the winds picked up. See, Jen? We didn't disintegrate on the descent. The guards were pleasant. The ride over here was smooth. And now all we need to do is take this guy from point A to point B, and we're done. 7,000 credits in the bag. I know, Turok. Let's just enjoy the ride. We still have to make the jump through the stream, and I have to mentally prepare myself not to throw up. Carl Mint, Yavik said. What? She asked. He turned to face them. Carrot Mint will help with nausea. It calms the human nervous system. Thank you, she replied. He nodded curtly and returned to facing forward. Her and Taruk exchanged a bewildered look, yet said nothing. Genesis closed her eyes and leaned her head back against the cushion behind her, drawing in a deep sigh. A loud, steady beat broke the silence, and she opened her eyes. The radar on the console had a blinking green dot that was moving slowly towards their position. Is that an Arparius moving through the sand? She asked the guard. Could be, but they usually stay away from the sand drifters. Probably nothing we need to worry about, Neris dismissed. Maybe we should go a little faster, she suggested, sitting up straighter in her seat. She turned around to look behind them. There was nothing there. The sunlight was fading fast. We don't need to. By the time Genesis heard it, it was too late. The thermal blast hit the side of their vehicle, caused it to shake violently, and nearly threw them off course. Yavit let out a small yelp as the guard struggled to keep the wheel steady. Drac! Where did that come from? Neris barked. It doesn't matter. We're under attack. Floor it! Turek shouted. He removed his pistol from his holster and began scanning their surroundings. They quickly picked up speed, and Genesis removed her own gun, turning her head in the general direction of the shot. Out of the corner of her eye to the southwest, another bright red clip cut through the air and barely missed the rear engine. They're attacking from our right, she exclaimed. The beeping increased in frequency, and soon she could hear the engine of their assailants' vehicles as they approached. Vroom. Two more vehicles followed not too far behind them, each with at least 4 hooded figures. Keep them off me. We've still got a ways to go, and this thing isn't built for combat. They began firing again, but not without return fire from Turk and Genesis. Keep your heads down, and she instructed. They still had a good distance between them and their attackers, but they were slowly catching up. Another bullet hit the rear and burned a hole in the metal, causing it to burn bright orange before it turned gray and started smoke. You keep driving a straight line and we'll never make it. Neris took a sharp right to throw them off their trajectory and sped up once he came out of the turn. I'll call for backup, but they might not get here in time. No use then. We'll have to take them on alone, Genesis shouted. They were trailing behind, but still emptying thermal clips at their drifter. You got any heavy rifles? No. Whatever you have on you is gonna have to do. As soon as he finished his statement, a bullet whizzed past Genesis' ear and clipped his shoulder. Ah! He grasped his shoulder, and the vehicle jerked violently to the left. They all toppled to one side, causing Genesis to fall onto her Iberian companion. Our chances of survival are greatly decreasing with each passing moment. You must right the vehicle and detain the bandits. Neris regained control, his breathing labored. I'm fine. We'll make it. I just need you guys to buy us time. How? Genesis asked. This vehicle doesn't have any heavy weapons or projectiles. You may release some of the power cells from the rear engine. They are highly explosive when enough force is applied to their shell. Yavik informed them. He was surprisingly calm. Turek immediately went for the metal hull of the rear of the vehicle and pried it back, exposing the wiring and the fuel cells. He removed 3 of them, and the sand drifter started to slow down. We'll be on foot if we remove them. If we remove all of them. That's just the chance we'll take. Drop them! With their slower pace, the bandits were quickly catching up and thus making them easier targets. Perfect. Turek chuckled. He threw the first, and as soon as it touched sand, a red-orange flame erupted from its impact. Closest vehicle was lifted high into the air and crashed into the sand. Its occupants violently thrown from their seats and onto the ground. Scratch one! Genesis whooped. The other 2 slowed down, creating more distance between them, and then started aiming their fire on Turek. He ducked down quickly as Eclipse was by. It's almost like they noticed that he's the one that threw it. Drax, get onto us! Genesis, here! He tossed one of the cells to her, and she nearly dropped it. Oof. She was surprised at its warmth, but could feel the raw energy rumbling violently inside of it through her palms. Be careful. On my cue, we throw them forward. Nurse, hit the brakes on my count. 3, 2, 1. Now! The engines fell silent, and they came to a near halt as the remaining 2 cars sailed by them into the night. Now, Genesis! In near perfect harmony, they threw their power cells, and one of the drifters exploded with the bandits inside. The other was only knocked on its side, the engine catching flames. The occupants vacated immediately, and within a few seconds, their vehicles also blew up, the amber-colored flames quickly dissipating. Floor it! Genesis commanded. Nerves stepped on the accelerator pedal, and the hovercraft struggled to move forward. The engine sputtered and refused to turn over, and the light emanating from the console faded away. Well, that's what's going to happen when you throw your fuel away. No, no, no! Nerves groaned, hitting the steering wheel. We're about 20 miles out, and we can't salvage anything from the wreckage to repair our sand drifter. Not to forget the 4 bandits currently headed our way, Yavik chimed in. I suggest we use the vehicle as cover and try to detain them before we are killed. I don't get it. The bandits never come to this stretch of the desert. They know it's Paris City Patrol's jurisdiction, Neris replied. He removed the safety from his assault rifle and checked the thermal clip. They all climbed out and onto the shifting landscape. If we make too many impacts in the sand, the Arperius will come and swarm this place. They are more active at night. Justice tensed suddenly, erratically searching the sand all around her. Are they restrictors or venomous? She asked, checking her inventory. Her pistol still had nearly a full clip, and there was an extra inner side bag. Both. Her brows furrowed. That's impossible. Not on Hamathar, Tarek added. We may want to disengage the Leviathan, the levitation course, so they can't shoot our feet from underneath us and leave us for the serpents. Suddenly, the drifter fell to the ground with a deafening thud, and they all looked at the Urdak, who had the levitation cord in his small hand. Done, he told them, and was quick to duck behind the vehicle. The 3 of them followed suit. Tarek peeked his head out from the left side, Neris from the right, and Genesis from the center, the muscles in her thighs wobbling as she got into a half-crouched stance, scanning their surroundings in front of them. Where are they? Without the headlights from the sand drifter, it's pitch black until they decide to start shooting again. What we need to worry about are the Arperias. They can sneak up on you without making a single sound. The only warning you get is a face full of venom or a broken leg before they drag you under. So if we survive this gunfight, how are we going to cross the rest of the way? Why haven't we called for backup by now? "Hmm, no, we'll have to move slowly and quietly. I haven't used my transmitter yet because the Arperius are especially sensitive to radio waves. They'll lock in on our location before we step 5 feet from this drifter. The comms are safer to use during the day when they're sleeping. And we're moving across the desert." "Fair enough," Genesis said. "Why haven't we spotted them yet?" We we can't sit here all night. We must keep moving," Yavik uttered. "I agree with the little guy. We're exposed on 3 sides and we need to get back to the security building fast," Turek added. "If you're not coming with us, then point us in the right direction at least." "We're all going," Genesis interjected. "That's the best way for us to survive the night. We need to move now." She went for Yavik, pulling out a second pair of cuffs from her side bag, latched them to his wrists, and then secured them to her belt. Nurse stood to full height, wincing as he did so. "We need to head northwest. No unnecessary talking, and if you do, whisper very, very quietly." Motioned for them to follow him. Genesis noted right away that he had slung his rifle around his right arm, while the left hung weakly at his side. "You should let me put some Metasalve and a bandage on that," she said softly. They were walking side by side now. "I'll be fine as long as we keep moving. Should get there by sunrise," he dismissed. "We can't afford to have our guide pass out in the desert. Let me help." Thermal clips cauterized the wound. "It just hurts like Ajathruka right now." She didn't press the issue and simply kept walking, her eyes to the night sky. The 3 moons cast a muted white light on the dunes in the distance. The silence was deafening, with the exception of their feet causing subtle shifting in the fine grain of the sand. "I'm not used to interacting with humans," Nurse said, breaking her concentration. "I've only seen your kind on the Galactic News Network." "And what was your impression?" she asked. "Scheming, overambitious, arrogant," he replied. She swallowed hard, scratching her head. "Well, that's not what I was expecting. But after today, I'm not so sure." Justice stared briefly at the side of his scaly face. His expression remained indiscernible in the gloomy light. Silence overtook them once again, and the four of them continued to walk in the darkness. By the time the sun began to rise, Genesis was dragging her legs through the sand. Yavik had needed to stop a few times, and as badly as she wanted to sit in the sand, she couldn't. It was barely traceable, but she could see the sand beneath her feet constantly shifting against the direction of the wind. Finally, on the horizon, the geometric shapes of the buildings started to take shape in the far distance. "We're close," she said, relieved. "Finally," Turek sighed, his voice cracking at the end. "I may have to sit down for 3 weeks after this." "Just a few more miles, then we're out of the barren dump," Genesis added. "We'll make it before the sun hits the zenith. You don't want to be in 150-degree weather without any sort of protection or water. They'll pass out in the sand in an hour without either, and then the little scavengers will come and feast on you until there's nothing left." "How's that arm?" she asked. "The pain has calmed down, but the gun is getting heavy," he replied. Truck walked in between them. "I'll carry it for you." "Legally, I'm not allowed to be without my firearm at any time, but this time I'll make an exception." He handed the rifle over. "Thanks, Iberian." "No problem. It's the least I can do considering you took a bullet, kept driving with a burning hole in your arm, and you managed to keep us alive for the past couple of hours walking through a serpent-ridden desert." "Don't thank me just yet. We haven't made it to the base." Genesis would have kept walking if Neris's uninjured arm hadn't stopped her dead head in her tracks. Confused, she looked up at his yellow-green eyes, and his pupils had narrowed to slits. His tongue clicked several times, which caused Yavik to start making small chirps like a bird. She was quick to cover his mouth to silence him. What is going on? Genesis whispered to her partner. She looked ahead of them. Another 20 or 30 minutes of walking, and they'd be at the base. Shh, Nurse urged them. We're being hunted. Move very slowly. Groaning softly, she intentionally took lighter, smaller steps in the sand. Her eyes carefully scanned their surroundings, but she couldn't detect any movement. The wind was constant, shifting the sand as soon as it settled. Red dunes all around them swayed in a wave-like motion. There was a light hiss over to the right. By the time she turned her head in the direction of the noise, it had stopped. Just as a precaution, Jen, you may want to disconnect our little felon from your belt, Turek uttered softly into her ear. She nodded curtly and disengaged the glowing rope around her belt loop. As they continued on as quietly as they could, the hissing returned. This time it was much closer and more intense. That doesn't sound good, she told Neris. Every muscle in her body was coiled like a tightly wound spring begging for release. The ground was shaking from the Arperius making his presence known to them. On my count, we run. It knows exactly where we all are, he informed them. Do not look back and do not try to fight it. Finally, Genesis saw its fire-red, scaly skin and yellow dorsal spikes appear briefly above the sands. Its milky white eye was roughly the size of her head. It's a big one. We may actually have a better chance. The bigger they are, the slower they move through the sand. We may be able to throw it off if we separate until we make it to the base. You can't go after all of us. And Turek chimed in. Are you all ready? Shay's nods. And now. Genesis immediately broke into a sprint, her eyes focused on the metal structures ahead of them in the distance. The large serpents broke the surface in front of them after they had covered several dozen yards, rearing back its spade-shaped head. They all stood frozen in place as it eyed the four of them, and she was quick to pull out her pistol and fire at it. The red-hot bullet hit its soft underbelly, and the Arperi spit out a yellow-green substance from its hollow fangs. She jumped out of the way, watching as the liquid oozed and sizzled before it disappeared into the sand. Keep moving, Genesis! Turek bellowed. They split into twos and went around the creature. Turek with her, Yavik with Neris. She heard the impact of it diving into the sand to continue its pursuit, but dared not look back. You didn't say anything about acid venom, she shouted. I didn't think it mattered, Turek replied. The massive creature was hot on their tail, and Genesis was loudly gasping for air. The shadow passed quickly overhead, and she looked up. The engine of a plane echoed through the air as it slowed down and made a hard U-turn back towards them. The lasers of the ship fired at the Arperius, giving them chase, and the tremors ceased and grew weaker as they continued running, and the beast retreated from the blasts. Parasitic Patrol came just in time, Neris said. She could hear the relief and exhaustion in his voice. He waved to the pilot, and the ship descended slowly, hovering just a few feet above the sand. The side door slid open, and a uniformed officer extended his hand. Yavik was quick to be first, with Neris close behind him. They pulled the Ernak aboard, and then time slowed to a crawl with what transpired after. Genesis saw the mouth of the rifle take aim at Neris's chest. A single blast went straight through his armor, shattering his chest plate. His blue blood splattered across the red sand behind him before he fell back to the ground. Eyes wide with confusion and anger, she lay there clutching his chest, and as they watched the assailant reveal himself to be a she, Genesis felt her blood turn to ice when she locked gazes with those familiar blood-red eyes. Thanks for bringing him right to us, she taunted with a bow. A wicked smile that didn't reach her eyes graced her pale face. We'll be going now. Genesis looked at their captive, whose face revealed no malice or foreknowledge of this plan. Fascinating, was all Yavik said before the door slid shut, and they quickly gained altitude until they were just a small black dot in the sky. She stood there looking up at the sky, he, where they had once been, until Turuk broke the silence. Genesis, we need to get Nerus to the base as soon as possible. He's dying. Shaking her head, she turned her attention to the Elkanah, whose breathing was labored as he tried to sit up on it on his own. Let us help you, she insisted, grabbing some invisi gauze for her pouch. The wound was a sizable hole in the left side of his chest. The laser partially cauterized the wound. This pad should help stop some of the bleeding. Nurse coughed, blood erupting from his mouth. Both she and Truck looked at one another, and he shook his head. His eyes began to close, and Genesis gently shook him. You have to stay awake until we get you to the infirmary. They can save you. Just hold on, she assured him. Face it, I'm lung shot. We're another 20 minutes out. I don't have that much time, he gasped. Do you have any family? She asked. Wife? Kids? He shook his head weakly. Never met the right girl. Work. I have a sister, Lyrene Fizek. Lyrene will be heartbroken if you give up now, Genesis replied, putting pressure on the wound. His eyes rolled back, his breasts were slick with blood. Haven't heard from her in months. Ugly argument. Maybe this is what I deserve. His lids closed, and his breast suddenly grew shallow. She felt all the blood drain from her face as she started pressing rhythmically on his chest. Then you need to survive so you can fix things. Tarek looked on for a moment before he neared her carefully. Genesis. He just needs some help to keep going, she huffed, still beating down on his chest. Genesis. She said nothing in response, sweat trickling down her forehead and into her brows. Tarek covered her hands with his, giving them a slight squeeze. Genesis, he's gone. His features lie perfectly still as if he went into a deep sleep. When the realization finally hit her, she turned away, getting to her feet. Drawing in a heavy sigh, she buried her face deep in her hands. If we hadn't taken the job, he'd still be alive, she said quietly. Profound silence grew between them. The gentle gusts of the early morning swayed around them, almost melancholy in sound. And we couldn't have possibly known that this would happen. There are risks with every assignment. Her eyes turned to the sky. Flock creatures passed overhead and towards the horizon. She watched as they slowly disappeared over the red dunes and towards an unknown destination. One thing leads to another. And that was chapter 1. And note, that is 17 pages out of 491 pages. That's the first time I've ever tried to do something like that. So, Enjoy, also known as Miss Story Dragon, on both Twitter and on YouTube, has just finished her first book. The book is called Singularity, and she had been been publishing each chapter as she did it to Twitter as she made it. But after she finished it, because she does want to actually publish it and and all that fun stuff, she has removed everything but the first 4 chapters from public Twitter. Er, And I have been reading it and giving her my commentary both publicly and privately the entire time that she's been writing it. In my opinion, her book is better than many books that I have read that are officially published. So I would suggest giving it a read. And I'm gonna put into the chat at her in the Twitter or thread where I'm pretty sure that she still has the first 4 chapters. So give me a sec. Because I'm pretty sure that she's got it pinned. I actually have not looked, and I'm looking at her pin, and I'm not seeing it there. Ah, dang it! The title says chop set and says chop. Ah, dang it! Well, I can fix that. I can fix that. Jeez. So yeah, I'm just gonna message her and just ask her where for a link to where she has the first 4 chapters. Okay, I'm in here, and now I'm changing from Chepet. Chepet. Edit. How did I do Chepet? There we go. That is fixed. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. So yeah, my opinion, this book is it's one of the better books that I've read, especially by a first time author. And I've read books. You don't want to know how many books I've read. I mean, the amount of books I've read comes into the thousands. Seriously, it really does. And when I was, it's probably why I don't tend to read fan fiction all that much because a lot of times when I read fanfic, I'm like, oh, this hurts. But when I was reading hers, it didn't feel like fan fiction because it isn't. It's the work of an honest to god good good artist, and I am proud to know her. And this book is an honest to god good book. And I hope that since you came in late, you'll go back to the beginning of the stream and you'll listen to it. But yeah, the the thing is that I I knew where the chapters were, but she but when she pulled down down all the stuff that she had after the first four, I'm not sure where the rest are right now. I think she might have done a little bit too good of a job in pulling them down. That makes any sense? She's both an artist and an author. She is. If you take a look at my at my EPFP, my avatar, she has done my PFP. So both artist and author. To give you an idea, take a look at this. Oh, actually, that nothing says that I can't do this. One moment. Open image in new tab. Let us let's change to have this instead. This is her rendering of what Genesis looks like. So, oh, and by the way, I will use I do actually use artist and author somewhat interchangeably for authors because I consider authors to be artists. So that might also be part of it. No, no, this person has not died. No, 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 no. Oh, Enjoy it, slash Miss Story Dragon is a very dear friend of mine, and and she has been writing this for like the last year and a half to 2 years. It's been her passion project, and when she's been fit and when she's had and the typical things where an artist hates themselves and thinks that at their work. Oh, Genesis? No. Genesis is the main character of. Okay, I did misunderstand you, but the same thing goes. It was no. Genesis did not die. Genesis is the main character of Singularity, and 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 this is and this is Anjoy's rendering of Genesis. So definitely not. But still, I'm going to finish what I was saying that when an Android had gotten down like artists tend to do, looking at their art, whether it be graphical or text based, is and going, it's terrible. I'm just going to delete it all. My response was, well, that's too bad. I've got it all archived on my computer, and you can't make me get rid of it because it's good. Because I'm that kind of person. I'm like, no, this is good. I don't care if you've decided that you're going to have an artist meltdown. I'm not going to let you get rid of it. And so I may be the reason why the book actually got to completion. I mean, I hope she would have gotten herself out of the tailspin without me, but I think I helped. And I would have tried to get her out of the tailspin either way, but I'm not sure I would have done it in that way because I try to be honest. And yeah, but yeah, when I say artist for her, she is an artist both graphically and as an author. So this is one of the things that I'm intending to do to try to help promote her book. Actually, Couch Potato, this is something that me and a couple other people who've been some of her beta readers have talked about. and all of us think it would be a great video game, and if I recall correctly, she agrees. Well, when we talk about a movie adaptation, what she's always said is that she would be thrilled to do movie adaptation, but she would insist on being on keeping complete control, which I completely understand because she's watched many other quote unquote adaptations happen and gone, oh my god, no. But if she could uh, make sure that nobody else perverted it, she would be on board with an adaptation. Oh, and by the way, when I say that this was chapter one, there's I believe about 20 chapters. Like I said, I just read 17 pages, and there's 491 pages. So yeah, there's a lot more where this comes from. And trust me, that this was just an introduction. So if you're interested, I would say to go follow Mystery Dragon on Twitter because that's where she's been posting most of her stuff. Mystery underscore Dragon. Okay, one sec. Okay, so I think I am going to end this stream. Oh yeah, actually, yeah, as far as that goes, there's another person in our in the beta readers group who has possibly a better voice than I do, who who has volunteered his voice for doing an audiobook. And if he can't do it, then I will help her with me reading it. From if you're I'm going to take this as a compliment right now because I was not sure how well people might like my voice reading it because I know I've got my stutter. I was suppressing it a lot during this. I'm pretty sure it came out a little bit, but uh, if the other person isn't able to come through, then I am more than happy to help her with reading it for the audiobook. Yeah, and I will make sure she knows about that. And thank you to whoever else is here. And I hope that after I finish the stream, I hope other people go back. Thank you. Please do. And not just for my own watch time or anything like that. This stream is literally me trying to help Android get this out there because this is a good book and I really want it to get noticed. That's why I'm doing this. So please go back and rewatch the entire stream. This is the first chapter for the book, and I hope people are not disappointed. Okay, so with that, I think I'm going to end the stream, and thank you to everybody who is here, and thank you to everybody who comes and watches afterwards, watches, or more importantly, listens, because I think this is a really good chapter. Thank you to everybody. Bye.